My name is Richard Ali. I was born in Kano and I grew up in Jos, so I've always had a bit of a cosmopolitan background. I studied law at Ahmadu Bello University and I have practiced law. I continue to practice law. And presently, amongst other things, I also co-own Parisia Publishers Limited, which is based in Lagos. It's Nigeria's third largest independent publishing company, and we've published some of the biggest voices in Nigerian literature, from Abubakar Adam Ibrahim to Chika Onigwe. Abubakar won $100,000 for the NLNG prize just last year. Chika Onigwe won it 3 years before. Helen Habila as well. So Parisia is a place where we believe that we keep Africa's words in trust, and that has been our philosophy. I came to join Parisia, or I came to found Parisia because of my interest in reading while I was growing up. In the 70s, when my father was growing up in Kano, what he used to do was he would leave an order at the bookshop, Zamani bookshop, and another one. So it was a basically very unusual order, and what he said was the two books that are most requested for in the course of the week should be kept for him on Friday. So when he's driving back home on Friday, he would pick the books. So that made for a very, very eclectic library while I was growing up, and by the time I came of age, of course, you would have James Hadley Chase sitting beside Wole Soyinka, and I started reading them. And eventually, with the ethno-religious economic crisis in Jos, I had an idea, why should I not write a book? And that's where the novel City of Memories came from. I met my partner Azafi after that, and we decided, okay, let's put together a publishing company. Nigerians do read, but the cost of getting them to read is exceedingly high. It's higher than the average country, and this is really a function of the infrastructure. We don't have national libraries in most states of the country. If, for example, each state capital had a national library, then we could use that for distribution, and at least books would get to each state capital. The same thing with bookshop chains. We don't have bookshop chains like the way developed markets have it. So in order to get a book across to the average Nigerian, it requires having deals with hundreds of independent bookshops. All this makes the books more expensive. By the time it reaches the average person, let's assume the person who is earning 18,000 a month, and the book is costing 3,000. He has to really consider whether he should get that book or not. So there is that. Then, because we're a largely import-dependent country, so things like the input that goes into creation of books, whether it's ink, whether it's paper, whether it's cover board, are tied to the US dollar. Now a ream of paper is going at almost 20,000. The average book, you need about 5 to 14 reams. So the cost of the books is also a problem. So on the publishing end, the costs are increasingly high. In terms of distribution, it's very, very difficult. In terms of marketing, because the margins are so little, it's exceedingly difficult to also market the books. So there are Nigerians who are there who want to read, who are all over the place, who wish to read, but the cost of getting these books across to them is difficult, it's hard to do, or is on the high side. So with the rise of the internet, which is Parisia, for example, is a creature of the internet. So we have tried to leverage on e-commerce and social media in order to get our books out there. And as much as the postal agencies work and the e-commerce sites work, so these have been the backbone of our business. But there is still a lot of people who are in a lot of places, unreached places, who want books in Nigeria, who simply do not have access to those books. That is on the one side. On the second side, we have an educational system, the Federal Ministry of Education, or whatever it's called, which is not imbuing our children with a desire to read. the general Nigerian curriculum from primary school to university is a Philistine curriculum. And if people like Boko Haram are screaming about that, then I would say they have a point. Because this is not a curriculum that is tied to national development, it's not tied to the development of the individual within the country. So, we have on the one hand the cost of publication and pushing the books out. But on the other hand, we also have a country that is not seeing reading as an aspect of national development. Publishing is a very exciting, it has been a very exciting journey for me. But I would say that the biggest, there are a lot of highs really, but so maybe I should speak about the most recent high. It's Abubakar Adam Ibrahim actually. Abubakar, we share the city of Jos together with him. He also grew up in Jos. He studied at the University of Jos. And at the time we set up Parisia, he had won the BBC Africa Performance Prize in 2008. So he already had a name for himself as a dramatist. But he decided he was going to write prose, short stories. And somehow, through Professor Kanchana Ogbabe, who we also share, she's an Indian professor of English at the University of Jos, we got introduced. And when we saw his debut collection of stories, The Whispering Trees, which we loved. I loved it. My partner Azafi in Lagos, she also absolutely loved it. And we said, look, this is the sort of books that we want to get out there. And right from that initial publication of The Whispering Trees, suddenly Abubakar's work has gone out there. It was shortlisted for the Kane Prize. In the year it was shortlisted for the Kane Prize, Parisia was the only in Africa publishing house whose work was shortlisted out of 5. The rest were presses that were based in the West. And in a lot of in other instances, the Whispering Trees and Abubakar's work has pushed our name out there. So it's, for me, that initial gamble, that initial belief that there is a certain sort of writing that deserves to be out there, it has paid off. A few years later, when he decided to write a novel, Season of Crimson Blossoms, of course we were with him on that one as well. And unsurprisingly, as much as possible, we knew that the book was a very good book and it would go places, but we were very pleasantly surprised and happy when it was shortlisted for the NLNG Prize, which is $100,000. When it eventually won, there is a sense, apart from the fact that Abubakar and his book won, there was the sense that there is an idea we had that there are certain words that we should hold in trust and put out there, that idea also was what had won. So I use Abubakar as a central point in the things that I think are important in what we've done. But every single book we have published, I have loved each and every one of these books, and each of them is an argument against a sort of complacency to say, oh, there's no space for this, there's no space for that. But we're saying, yes, there's space. There may just be 4 people a year, but we will make that space, which is what Parisia is about, really.